Welcome to Convergence. Albert Einstein said one of the most difficult problems in all of physics is the Earth's magnetic field. My name is Michael Doran. I'm a California attorney, and I argue that among the most difficult problems in all of biology is Earth's magnetic field. Today I want to talk about birds and plants. When I was younger, my mom was a gardener, and she raved about birds singing and growing giant vegetables. And it was something that was kind of interesting to talk about, but I didn't really make the connection that I do now to where that comes from. And as we talked about bees, something with such a tiny brain, which does such complex things, it's indicative of a quantum calculation, something that occurs on a very tiny level. And in the past two episodes, I kind of described how that matches up with what's going on, or what went on in clouds with nucleotides in the clouds. Today I want to talk a little bit about the same sort of subject, where how does a plant without even any nervous tissue do such complicated things, like when it hears the sound of a bird, it grows more. And that again indicates something that is connected to the DNA. Rather, there's no nerves for the plant. So when the plants evolved, they don't have the ability to move, other than as seeds, which is kind of the male aspect, where it gets into the clouds and it changes the cloud behaviors in terms of pollen, very much like naked nucleotides. But other than that, if you're talking about a maple leaf that gets in a maple seed, that gets into the wind and is like a helicopter, it moves around. The seeds can move a little bit, and maybe that's closely attuned to what pollen might have done in the past. But for the most part, plants are stuck where they are. And if anything, plants have a purpose of burning and putting carbonation directly into the air if the environment is dry and the rain feedbacks are not there. Plants burn, and they're the perfect feedback for maintaining an area that gets rainfall, because the burning itself causes a localized or a fixed position feedback to a living earth. But this idea that a plant reacts to frequency is even more, in my view, even more profound. The bees, when they're buzzing, they're certainly making a frequency, but when a bee interacts with a flower, it's more about the static charge differences that attracts the pollen to the bee. You don't get an actual change of growth by a bee. You'll get pollination by a bee, which is then connected because of the bee's sensitivity to the Earth's magnetic field and all the electrical things that are going on, and the fact that the bee has nervous tissue, that all makes the plants that much more intelligent, and makes up for the fact that plants can't move, they don't have nerves. But this idea that a plant hears the sound of a bird and grows and reacts. So on the web, under canagardening.com, there's an article by D. Crozy, MSc, canna research, which is funny to me. It's marijuana. And the article goes, a few years ago, scientists at the University of California, San Diego discovered a signal mechanism that controls a plant's stomata. The two cells that form the stoma consist of specialized cells, guard cells, that are tuned to the resonant frequency of calcium. I'm not really sure what that means, but that's what she's saying. If the frequency is not exactly right, the cells will open again. When the cells are exposed to this frequency, the stomas close. However, if the frequency is not exactly right, the cells will open again within an hour. This happens even if the concentration of calcium is high enough that the stoma would normally close. Experiments have shown that exposure to high tones were more or less directly responsible for increased gas exchange, and not just after an hour. So then she goes on and says, when specific music, high tones, or bird songs cause the plant to vibrate, but not the exact frequency for calcium resonance, the stoma will open for the lapse of time, even though the plant would keep them closed under normal circumstances. Testing has shown that a leaf fertilizer applied to the plant will have more effect on the development and growth of the plant if the stomata are wide open. This is quite logical because plants absorb leaf fertilizer through their stomata. The combinations of frequency and leaf fertilizer are available for many different crops. There are some catches to this method. If the stomata is forced to remain open, the plant will not be able to control the amount of water lost through perspiration, and so risks dehydration. As a result of exposing your plant to music for over 3 hours a day could endanger its health. And that's what my mom did. She had the actual frequency, and she had a fertilizer, and she would try to grow giant tomatoes or giant cucumbers or whatever. There could also be negative effects on your favorite plants if the volume or frequency is too high, an effect that cannot be explained based on the opening and closing of the stomata. The negative influence of a frequency which is too high could possibly be explained by using a technique known as shell resonance. Besides resonance, which causes stomata to open for the influence of music or specific tones, there's another technique that might be able to explain the effects of music on our plants. This technique is known as shell resonance, and it simulates or inhibits the synthesis of proteins in the plants. Various tones have a role to play here. The theory behind this is that proteins, which consist of amino acids, are synthesized and tuned to vibration. Okay, so a lot to take in here, and I want to give it some context. What we're talking about with nucleotides and AC fields affecting cloud dynamics in a calculated way, being able to model and feedback this quantum brain of the living earth. We have the Schumann resonances where 7.87 is the fundamental node where you're basically talking about a wave goes through and it becomes a standing wave, which it goes around the earth, and the standing wave has to do with bouncing between the surface of the earth and the ionosphere. Just kind of like AM radio signals will travel a long distance. It's about a bounce off the ionosphere. And this occurs every time lightning strikes. You get, it's like ringing a bell. You get a resonance, and the standing wave occurs when you talk about global lightning and a consistency that comes from a wave that itself is causative of lightning because it plays with a potential difference, and you get an organization of a standing wave. And that standing wave is 7.83 hertz. It's ultra low frequency. It's a low frequency standing wave. Well, that fundamental node, and then the second fundamental node is 14.1 hertz. Just basically, you add another node on top of that, and you get a double. You get more frequent wave. Now, our brain waves, alpha waves are 9 to 13 hertz. Now we're talking about nerves. Our brains are made of nerves, and beta waves are 14 to 30 hertz. And so when you start talking about a plant which has no nerves, and yet it's reactive to these bird sounds, it's very interesting. So the article goes on, the influence of resonance in the human body is also subject to research. TENS units are utilized for a specific frequency to simulate the generation of specific substances in the body. For example, the frequency of 10 hertz is thought to stimulate the creation of a neurotransmitter serotonin. And guess what? Serotonin is an amino acid. The reason that different tones could be such an influence on plants is because hormones such as axin, which is one of the substances responsible for cell extension and fruit formation, only consists of 2 amino acids. Allowing the plant to vibrate just long enough at the frequency of these 2 amino acids should increase the production of desirable plant hormone, thus making bigger shoots. Music could also have an influence on seed germination. A publication in the Journal of Alternative and Complementary Medicine describes an experiment where music resulted in a higher germination percentage and a faster germination. It appears, however, that sound does not have any effect on germination, so it seems that multiple frequencies are significant because germination is all about hormones. It is all likely that shell resonance has a role to play here. And then she goes on to say that plants prefer classical music. But so what I want to point out here is if you have a bird singing at high frequency, say in the morning, and there's rain or there's a damp morning dew, and the bird's singing, and the bird's going to the bathroom around the plants, you're going to get an open stoma, you're going to get stomata, and you're going to get fertilization from the birds. And the birds themselves then have this neural tissue, I think sometimes in the beak, and they migrate to the Earth's magnetic field. And there's been studies that, for instance, have shown when you put magnets on a carrier pigeon, they can't deliver the note because they travel with this sense of the Earth's magnetic field. And so when you you have a symbiotic relationship with the bird that has these nerves that and sensitive to the Earth's magnetic field with plants, which can't move, you get between them a sensitivity to the Earth's magnetic field, and this is again where the quantum brain of the Earth is now. It's in many things, but this is yet a good example of where the mind of the Earth is now. And so we talk about tree huggers and all that kind of goofy stuff without any science behind it. I believe this is a totally different approach to talk about how there is an intelligence in reactiveness to the Earth's magnetic field because there's so much at stake. If the Earth's magnetic field is too strong, you get a dead planet, a gas ball. If it's too weak, you get Mars, also a dead planet. So I wanted to just talk about a couple more things here. It's very interesting if you think about what the technology of a telephone transmitter is, how you take a sound wave and then you have a magnet and then a wire around it, and the wire around it moves relative to the magnet and the vibration, and you end up getting an electrical current. That's an alternating current. It doesn't take that much to go from something that takes a vibration and turns it into an electrical signal. So if you have a sound signal, that is, with a magnet and induction, it's very simple in evolutionary terms for it to create an electrical signal. And the electrical signal with the plant, it has to, in the cells of the plant, it just has to interact with the nucleotides or the DNA or the RNA to produce a reaction that is different than a nerve reaction, obviously. But to open and close the stomata is not as radical of a concept if you consider that the nucleotides themselves have this quantum brain, this intelligence, and at a very tiny level. So plants are again evidence that this has to come. Since this intelligence comes from the nucleotides, it comes from a very fundamental and very old beginning, which is again indicative of the fact that this is an order that had to be calculated and created even before there were cells. It's more evidence of a quantum brain that the Earth has had, that since the electrical conditions have changed, as the Earth has changed, there's more oxygen in the air, greater ozone layer, all those different things, as that has changed, and as the oceans have become more saline, and again an intelligence response to a more luminous sun, the direct role of nucleotides in the sky has disappeared, and all we're left is carbon dioxide of having this influence. But the nucleotides went into different places, all life have the nucleotides, but went out of the sky and began to have an indirect role. And plants in particular, because they produce carbon dioxide, they produce oxygen, but because they take out of the ground the nutrients, and with photosynthesis convert CO2 into carbon and oxygen, but mostly the carbon. Plants fix where carbon is, so that either where they grow or they don't grow becomes very significant for either how they flow into the ocean for decarbonation events with surface lows, or how they burn and get directly into clouds. And when you tie that, because we're all carbon life, with systems of creatures that have nerves that are sensitive to the Earth's magnetic field, then you get an intelligent, with a quantum brain, you get this high intelligence, you get the person. So not only do you get daisy land, or do you get the ability to be hot or cold, depending upon what the inputs are, but you also have somebody controlling the thermostat. You have intelligence controlling the thermostat. And that's what plants do. And so when we start talking about human interaction with agriculture, with the living earth, we talk about dams, we talk about all these different types of things that have begun to get so active compared to what these natural processes are that dampen or modulate the Earth's magnetic field. This is where we start to have problems. And the first step is to understand what these intelligent things are that are going on, so that in that context that we can start to ourselves be stewards of the planet. So we can be beekeepers. We can have agriculture, and we can have migratory birds. We can have salmon. We're another creature that uses Earth's magnetic field to navigate. So, and salmon are a great example of where you have life that starts in the ocean, where decarbonation events go or occur, and you get the most electrical events on Earth, which are tropical storms. It can go from that area, go up a river, which is contrary to thermodynamics, because they're swimming upstream, and then a bird, a raptor or some other bird, can capture the salmon, and as the salmon is going upstream, it goes from saline body to freshwater, and that causes their skin to rot, and then that allows for bacteria to get on their skin, and then say an eagle or some other raptor picks up the bird and flies to the mountaintop again against thermodynamic. It's moving upstream, and then it's spreading the bacteria around. It's basically, with any feedback system, you need information, and intelligence and information is being moved and passed, and say eventually that the bird goes to the bathroom around the plants or the trees or the flowers where its nests are. It's going to start to fertilize and enhance that carbon that's there, depending upon, again, is this being a part of a solution of a living Earth? Is it dampening or modulating the Earth's magnetic field? And so having something like the stomata being sensitive to a bird's sounds is just one example of this connection between nerve tissue that's evolved to be sensitive to the Earth's magnetic field, and plants which have the ability to fix carbon and carbon dioxide and get carbon out of the ground and then get it out of the air too, because of photosynthesis. And to look at what's going on in clouds and talk about carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas without looking at what carbon dioxide does directly in clouds in the context of magnetic fields, alternating currents, DC currents, is just incredibly sad that we're doing it that way, or talking about it that way politically. And talking about renewable sources of energy without really understanding what that means, what the context is, what a dam really does, how it causes defects and feedback loops. It's not a renewable energy at all. Well, I mean, it is as it's defined, but it's problematic. And because we don't understand the mechanisms here, we're not able to properly describe policy that would be helpful for climate. It's a dampened system. It's not chaotic or random. It's something that's taking inputs from the sun, from space, on the Earth's magnetic field and on global lightning patterns, and it's producing stability in the Earth's magnetic field. Okay, that's all I have for you today. Have a good one. Subscribe if you could, and thank you for your time.